The Hoosiers are one day away from yet another top 10 matchup as they take on Penn State on Saturday. We have everything you need for Saturday's game coming up, along with my special guest, Jared, here in just a moment.
You are Locked On Hoosiers, your daily podcast on the Indiana Hoosiers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, guys? It is Friday, October 1st. I almost said September 31st. October 1st here for you guys, and this is Locked On Hoosiers. As always, I am your host, Jacob Rude. Joining me, eventually one of these days, it'll be regularly on Tuesday once we get all set in, but joining me today is Jared. Jared, my man, how are you?
I'm good, buddy, and I gotta say, it was an absolute pleasure watching the IU game with you last week, and that's not something that I foresaw happening anytime soon. So it was really great to be able to do that with you, pal, and go through how dare I say motions, go through the emotions of the IU football game together.
Yeah, as I mentioned a couple times on the podcast, as those who watched on YouTube saw, I was recording from a hotel room, but Jared and I watched that Western Kentucky game together. It was fun to be able to watch with somebody who experiences the same pain I do when watching IU football. It's always better to go through traumatic stuff like that together in a group. As I mentioned, we have our YouTube channel up. Be sure you guys have subscribed to that. Thank you for making Locked On Hoosiers your first listen every day. Remember that Locked On Hoosiers is free and available on all platforms, anywhere you guys listen to podcasts at. As always, on Friday's episodes, we will have all the basic information, all the betting information, some matchups that we will be watching on Saturday. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at LO_Hoosiers, on Instagram at Locked On Hoosiers. We're going to jump right into it because I think this might be a little bit of a busier show. If you guys didn't see Thursday's episode or listen to it, it was the crossover episode with Kevin. That was a lot of fun with Locked On Nittany Lions. Be sure to listen to that to get better idea of what the Hoosiers have in front of them with Penn State. But that is the game, obviously, on Saturday, IU versus Penn State, 7:30 p.m. Eastern on ABC primetime. Do you ever remember IU being on an ABC primetime game?
Maybe a 3:30 kickoff, and that was probably one of those games where we got demolished by Wisconsin. So that traditionally, I don't think that's our strong suit, but it's not really a tradition regardless. So I'm happy to be here.
It's I know that we've been on ABC a couple times. I think some Michigan games we were on ABC too. Seems like I remember, but 7:30 kickoff, I do not remember. The whole world will get to experience IU football on primetime on Saturday. Game is obviously at University Park, Happy Valley, Beaver Stadium, whatever you want to call it. They will have a stripe out on Saturday night, as Kevin mentioned in yesterday's podcast. Coming into this, it doesn't look great for the Hoosiers. SP Plus, that we reference often, projects Penn State by 20.4 points with an 88% win probability. They project a final score of 36-15. It's a little higher than the betting lines that we'll get to later in the show, but those SP numbers have been pretty spot on. If anything, they've been a little favorable towards IU early in the season. Coming in, Penn State has absolutely dominated this series, although IU has the last win. But the Nittany Lions have won 22 of the other 23 games that they've played. The only other win, and I was actually at this game October 5th, 2013. Did you happen to be at that game, Jared?
I did not happen to be at that game, and I'm going to be honest, I don't even remember that happening. I was pretty certain last year that was our first win over Penn State in like 25 years. So despite being a student at IU at the time, don't remember that one.
Do you have any guesses as to who IU's leading passer was that game? And it's a trick question because there's two possibilities.
So that was our dual quarterback here, huh? So that was
yeah.
So what was that? That was Xander Diamond, or I have to go Xander Diamond because I don't remember the other quarterback in that rotation. I just remember it made me mad when we did that. So I got to go Xander.
Shockingly, you mentioned one of the quarterbacks that did not throw a pass that season. I think Xander was the next season. He was 2014. 2013, Nate Sudfeld and Trey Roberson were the quarterbacks. Sudfeld actually threw for 320 yards and 2 touchdowns. The star of the show for IU, though, was Tevin Coleman, who had 147 yards total from scrimmage, a touchdown. Cody Latimer had 9 catches for 140 yards. Kofi Hughes had 85 yards and a touchdown. I missed some of those guys. Sometimes I miss Chaos Team, but then I look back at that 2013 IU team that finished 5-7, and that was one of the highlights of the Kevin Wilson era, and I do not miss that. So outside of that game and last season, IU has not beaten Penn State at all, and there's been some really ugly games in there. There's been some blowouts in there, but there's also been a handful of really close games, especially recently. It's going to be IU's third top 10 game this season, or matchup against the top 10 opponent this season. Looking at the schedule, we talked a little bit about it before the season on here. It looked like a tough schedule before the season, and it has gotten much tougher. IU has already played Iowa. They've already played Cincinnati, 2 top 10 teams. They have Penn State now, and they still have games against number 10 Ohio State, number 14 Michigan, number 16 Michigan State. By mid-October, IU will have played 6 of the top 16 teams current rankings. It could obviously change, but that's over a third of the top 16 teams IU will have played. I know you have some thoughts on that, Jared, and it's going to segue into our second segment, just kind of talking about where IU stands heading into this game. Before we do that, though, we need to talk about Built Bar, our friends over there at Built Bar. Did you guys know that they have so many delicious flavors, whether it's coconut, cherry barcia, double chocolate, salted caramel? They have everything, cookies and cream. If you know what your favorite flavor is, you guys, I'm sure, love them. If you don't, you can get a variety box that has 2 of each of those flavors to figure out your own favorite. Not only are they tasty, though, they are healthy as well. Looking at 17 to 18 grams of protein, 130 to 180 calories, 4 to 5 grams of sugar, 4 to 5 grams of net carbs. You got amazing flavors. They're all tasty. They're all healthy. Head on over to built.com. Use promo code LOCKED15. You'll get 15% off your order. That's promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. Thank you again for making Locked On Hoosiers your first listen every day. We're still going to get Jared's thoughts on this IU schedule here in just a moment. But when we're done with all that, make sure your second listen today is the Locked On Big Ten podcast with Nate Dickinson, as Big Ten play really and truly gets underway this weekend. Jared, this is an absolutely brutal schedule. And does this increase the pressure on IU, do you think?
So I think it works twofold here. I think that there should be no pressure. This should be the first game of the season where there is truly no pressure on this team. You know, week 1, obviously the expectations coming off a great year last year against Iowa, disappointed. Cincinnati, everyone was just kind of hoping we got a little bit back on track for that game. Didn't really have too many expectations, but we're still hopeful, probably more hopeful than we should have been. And then Western Kentucky, where, again, no expectations, so to speak, because of the quote-unquote quality of the opponent. But there was pressure to sort of fix some things that were wrong and just get that first win of the year. They got it done. They got it out of the way. Doesn't matter how they did it. So there really should not be much pressure here. This is just another standard IU game, as it is every year. You know, big ranked Big Ten opponent. Unranked IU, the pressure is off in this game. We're in Beaver Stadium. No one is expecting us to get this win, especially given how bad Penn State was last year and how close that game was. But there really should not be much pressure on them to win this game. Where the pressure should be applied, and again, this goes back to sort of that Western Kentucky game, is fixing some things that are wrong with the team fundamentally. You're just going to want to see them, they struggled through the air, defending the pass last week. You'd like to see them sort of fix that cornerback rotation that they have, a lot of moving pieces with those injuries last week. But look, I think as long as McFadden is on the field, the defense is going to have a chance. And if the defense has a chance, then we're just going to need Penix to show up. So I don't think that there should be many expectations for this game. I think there should be the expectation that they get some things figured out for the remainder of the schedule.
And that's an interesting kind of view to that I like, and it wasn't one that I thought of. As I mentioned, I did the show with Kevin yesterday on Thursday's episode for Locked On Nittany Lions. I also was on Roar Lion Roar with Bill DiFilippo on Thursday as well. It came out today or it should be out, I believe, by the time you're listening to this. So if you want to hear me talk more about IU with Penn State folks, there's plenty of places. But Bill asked a kind of a question of, is there pressure on IU to win and kind of prove that they were worthy of those preseason expectations? It wasn't something I'd thought of at the time. I don't know. I kind of didn't really know how to answer it because I kind of don't know where to stand with this IU team. Like, I think they're still a good team, but the problem is they're in a really, really good division, like arguably the best division in college football. It's them or whichever SEC division has Alabama and Arkansas in it, the SEC West. These two divisions are just chock full of talented teams. There's 5 ranked teams in the Big Ten right now, and 4 of them are in the Big Ten East. I use it 2-2, and it's the bottom team in the division. So I think this IU team's pretty good, but it could ultimately lead to this division basically beating each other up, and IU doesn't come away with a very pretty record. You would hope that's not the case, but with how Michigan and Michigan State have been playing of late, it's suddenly the path to 6 wins is getting a little murkier, which is kind of what we always talked about. But coming back to this Penn State game, it's going to be interesting because I think IU is in a bit of a comfort zone last season as an underdog, and nobody really expecting them to compete. Even when they got some big wins, it was like it was such a surprise that nobody really still expected it to keep going. There were expectations this season, but as you said, this is the first time IU is the big underdog and fully no expectations coming into this game. So in that sense, it'll be interesting to see how they respond. At the same time, you're playing a night game at Beaver Stadium, and though that atmosphere is about as good as it gets in college football, save for them maybe having a whiteout or the Ohio State-Michigan game, things like that, Oregon. There's a couple other exceptions. Other question I kind of had, we joked about it when we were watching on Saturday because I still said 8-4 was the ceiling for this team. Where do you stand on that? Because I don't think you feel the same way.
Well, you know where I stand on it with this team. Look, we barely scraped home, road, neutral field, doesn't matter. We didn't really play well against Western Kentucky. We didn't play an Idaho kind of game. And apologies, by the way, because before I said Western Kentucky was the first win of the year, I meant to say it was the first real win of the year. All respect to Idaho, but that's rarely do you have a forgettable win in a college football season. That was one. But to come back to your question, 8-4 was always the ceiling. No matter how we looked at it, look, no matter how optimistic you can be, even if the Iowa game went right, even if one of the Iowa or Cincinnati games went right, you still can't, especially with this 4-game slate of Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan State, asking for 2-2 is really, really difficult against that. That is maximum that you should be thinking of. I always thought 7 wins was really going to be the ceiling once we sort of settled into the season and realized what this IU team was going to be. I still think we can go 1-3 in this stretch, and I think that's what the team should be aiming for. Right now, Michigan and Michigan State seem to be the soft spots. Ohio State does seem a little bit vulnerable, but I would say 7 wins should be the adjusted ceiling, and I'm expecting 6. I am hoping for 7. I don't really know how to react if we get 8. They should put us in the Big Ten title game. I don't care if we get 8 wins. They should put us in the Big Ten title game. That's my take.
Yeah, and when we did this in the preseason, we kind of penciled in Michigan State and Michigan as wins, and that was how you got to 8-4, because you could still lose to Iowa, Cincinnati, Penn State, and Ohio State. That all still seems likely, though. As you said, Ohio State seems a lot more winnable now than it did in September or August even. But yeah, this stretch right now, Penn State this week, you have a bye week, Michigan State, Ohio State, Maryland, and Michigan. That is, I mean, it happens every year, this stretch. It's brutal every time, and it seems more and more brutal each passing year, especially when IU is trying to compete. The thing is now that assuming that IU goes 0-4 against those teams, or I guess 1-4 if they beat Maryland, that means you suddenly have to win the last 3 games of the year to become bowl eligible, and suddenly things get a lot murkier. So it's an interesting place for this Indiana team. They do themselves a lot of favors right now to win one of these next 4 games against these ranked teams. I just don't know that Penn State's going to be the one. We have some matchups to watch. If IU is going to come away with a victory on Saturday, there's going to be some key areas that they are going to have to win. Before we talk about those areas, though, it's our betting segment here. BetOnline. We talk about it all the time. Right now, they have the Hoosiers at plus 12.5. IU is a plus 360 money line. Penn State's minus 450 with an over-under of 53.5. Keep all those numbers in mind for a minute, Jared, because I'm going to get your thoughts on those. As always, BetOnline is the number one place for you guys to bet on college or pro football this season. Head over there today with your mobile device, on your laptop, your computer. Get signed up and receive a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit with promo code LOCKED ON. That's 50% welcome bonus with promo code LOCKED ON. It's free money. From football, basketball, boxing, right to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers for the 2021 season. BetOnline's the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts. We also have Prize Picks that we've talked about. Again, unfortunately, they don't have the IU Penn State game up. It looked like they only had up to the 3:30 games on Saturday, so might tweet some of those out on Friday. So be sure you guys are following at @LO_Hoosiers. But for those that don't know, Prize Picks is a leader in college sports daily fantasy. They have more props than you guys could imagine for basically every game, and they've had every IU game save for the Idaho game, I believe, on there eventually. And I was looking today, you have WNBA, you have NASCAR with their fantasy score. I don't even know how that works. But if you're a NASCAR fan, they have that over there. They have UFC. They have everything you guys could imagine. And they have multi-sport parlays as well, or entries as well. So if you guys have a NASCAR prop that you like, you can pair it with Michael Penix's passing touchdowns and some other things to bet. So all users that deposit and use promo code Locked On will receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100. Again, more free money for you guys. We're trying to throw money at you guys this week. So use the award-winning app on both the App Store or Google Play. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's that easy. Prize Picks is safe and offers fast withdrawals. Don't hesitate. Use that promo code Locked On, and go to the App Store, download the app, join Prize Picks today. Jared, I mentioned the BetOnline odds. again, plus 12.5 for IU, 360 money line, plus 360, minus 450 Penn State, and over under a 53.5. Do any of those numbers stick out to you as a good bet this week?
Yeah, if I was a gambling man, I would go with Penn State minus 12.5. Especially you mentioned earlier, SP Plus has been pretty accurate in terms of predicting IU scores. If not favorable to us, 12.5 feels favorable anyways. The way that we've played most of the year, with the lone exception being against Idaho, didn't play great last week, not carrying a ton of momentum other than a win into this week. A lot of injuries. I just don't feel good about that. I do also feel good about under 53.5. Again, IU offense not as good, not as potent as it was last year. Penn State at home under the lights, usually a really, really raucous crowd, really strong on defense. I think that under 53.5 sounds like a really good line to me.
Yeah, I would say 12.5 is like the bottom of the range for IU. That I think that would be a pretty good result if they can keep it that close. But I also think the 20 from SP Plus is kind of top of that. So I predicted a 14-point Penn State win. I would take that. I would also say that if IU is going to win this game, I think that they're going to have to hit that over. They're going to have to win in a bit of a shootout. And right now, I don't know if the offense is capable of that. I'd like to think so after that Western Kentucky game, but I'm not sure how capable they are. As always, we'll wrap up today with some matchups to watch. The one that I keep mentioning, the one that I'm most excited to watch is Datsun versus Mullen, one of the top wide receivers in the Big Ten for Penn State, and one of the top cornerbacks both in the Big Ten and in the country, in Tywone Mullen. So that's, as I've said a couple times, it's one of the first times that Mullen's this season is going to have a kind of a top player to match up across with, and Jahan Dotson is as good as it's going to get, save for maybe Chris Olave from Ohio State this season. So I'm excited to watch that matchup. And I mean, Tywone Mullen has been really good. He was the highest graded player by Pro Football Focus last week in the Western Kentucky game. He had some big pass breakups. He had a couple tackles and came up with some timely plays. He gave up 3 catches, but on 8 targets. So strong outing from him. Jared, is there a matchup you're going to be watching on Saturday?
Yeah, so it's a little bit of an oxymoron, but it's going to be IU versus themselves. Look, you go on the road. Anyone knows this, home or on the road, but especially on the road. Nationally televised game, you cannot beat yourself. That means no dumb penalties. The drops, they have to cut out the drops. I'm as high on this IU wide receiving core as any other group on the team. They got to catch the ball. They got to maintain their focus. Any sort of slip up. You saw it in week 1 when we were on the road at Iowa. We really lost that game because of mental errors, lack of focus, crucial penalties, putting us in long down situations. There is no worse place to be on the planet than going to Penn State and facing 1st and 20, 2nd and 20 because of a holding, 1st and 15 because of a false start. You cannot have that happen. You have to execute nearly flawlessly against this team, especially this iteration of a Penn State team, which just had, I believe, its first quarterback ever to throw for 4 touchdowns and 400 yards in a game. Pass defense did not look that strong last week against Western Kentucky, especially in crunch time while we were playing with a lead. It's just going to have to be that level of focus that they're going to need to really lock in and just try to close. Open. You have to open strong. Obviously, they have not been great at opening games, but it's really going to come down the stretch. That's when the pressure is going to be cranked up to 11. That's when it's going to get really, really loud and really rowdy at Beaver Stadium. So they need to respond with being a strong mental football team.
And yeah, as you said, last time they were in a raucous crowd for a Big Ten game, it was a literal slip up that led to a pick 6 and really sent that crowd into a frenzy. So that was a great one. The only other one I'll briefly mention is IU's running game versus Penn State's defense. when we were talking to Kevin. He said really the two areas that Penn State have struggled in right now is running the ball and stopping the run. Unfortunately, IU, I don't know how well they're going to be able to run the ball, especially with that offensive line we've talked about. But if they're able to, there's opportunities there. But it'll be interesting to see. Stephen Carr, I thought, was tremendous last week, but it was because he was making a lot of guys miss, and especially behind the line. You can get away with that at Western Kentucky. I don't know if you can get away with that against Penn State. So that'll be an interesting matchup to watch. Thanks again, guys, for making Locked On Hoosiers your first listen every day. We'll be back on Monday with reactions to this game. I suppose there's a chance if we win, there might be a instant reaction emergency podcast, depending on my sobriety level, to be honest, if we win that game, because I will be celebrating if we do. But for your second listen, head on over to the Locked On Pacers podcast with Tony East and Adam Friedman. It's media days were this week, and training camps have gotten underway, so there's plenty of news on the NBA front over there. They will have you guys all covered with anything Pacers related. As always, if you guys can, leave a rating and review wherever you guys listen to us or watch us at. Be sure to subscribe to us on YouTube as well. While you're subscribing to things, head on over to the Locked On Bets podcast with your boy Q, handicapping expert Lee Sterling. I would imagine the IU Penn State game has come up over there because it is the primetime game on Saturday night on ABC. So it's one of the big ones. I'm sure they talked about it. Go give them a listen, see what they have to say. That'll do it for us today. Appreciate you guys listening as always. Appreciate you, Jared, for coming on. And have a great Friday. Have a great weekend, everybody. We'll be back on Monday, and LEO.